So this week, Rise of Skywalker finally hits theaters. In anticipation, I've been reviewing each of the Star Wars episodes in release order. This is the final part of the series, so we are talking about The Last Jedi. And I'm really hoping we can have a reasonable, peaceful, friendly, healthy conversation down below in the comment section. Or at least it doesn't get too toxic. So let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Share your take on Star Wars The Last Jedi. Now, in all of my videos, I tell you, we're gonna disagree. Let's just keep it respectful. More so than normal, we are going to disagree. That's not a bad thing. It's a bad thing when it turns toxic. It's a bad thing when it turns personal. It's a bad thing when we can't have a reasonable conversation. We start assuming bad things about other people. And that's one of the things that I think is kind of most frustrating about The Last Jedi. It's not even the movie itself. It's that it's brought out the worst of Star Wars fans online, that we're still having very unreasonable discussions about it. So let's try to not do that down below in the comment section. Let's try and keep it respectful. We all love Star Wars. That's why we're passionate about it. So we're among brothers and sisters as Star Wars fans. And let's try and remember that when we talk to people that have very different opinions on a movie that, for whatever reason, has drawn out big emotions from people. Just so you know, I'm seeing Rise of Skywalker on Tuesday at 1 p.m. Central Time, and the review embargo for all reviews is 2:01 a.m. Central Time. That's when I intend for my review to drop, so it'll be Wednesday at 2 a.m. right there in the morning Central Time, when my review up and when everybody else's reviews will just start to explode on the internet in the middle of the night in the United States, at least. So this is one of the movies, The Last Jedi, back to The Last Jedi, that for whatever reason has just polarized audiences. And I'm going to dive into why I think that is a little bit, but it just kind of like has split the audience in a way that very few movies have caused this much division within a fan base. Because it's not just that some people like it, some people dislike it. That's a lot of, like you hear about Man of Steel. Some people really liked it, some people really didn't. But you could understand, the two sides seem to be able to understand each other, why some people liked what Zack Snyder did with Man of Steel and other people that didn't like it. They could see what someone was seeing in it, like you could see it. But with The Last Jedi, it just seems like it's this split, and the two sides are absolutely polarized. I love it. I hate it. 10, 0. This movie saved Star Wars. This movie ruined my childhood. Like, you just see both of these. You see articles making these big, bold statements. You have any conversation about it on Twitter or in the YouTube comment section. It's all this escalated language. And the part that's so strange to me is that, like, the two sides can't even talk to each other. They can't even find the middle ground, the bridges. It's just every issue is it's great over here or it's awful over here, and there's no middle ground. That's kind of weird to me. And it's almost as if people are like, we're seeing two totally different sets of movies. Like, these people over here are just absolutely watching a masterpiece, and these people really are watching a literal dumpster fire with a picture of Mark Hamill taped onto it. Like, there's just no conversation between the two groups. Even if you try and talk through it, like, oh, it was so thematically rich, and it's the best shot, and finally a Star Wars movie that's bold and willing to take risks. And over here, it's like, they don't understand Star Wars. It's all garbage. It's all plot holes. It makes absolutely no sense. There's no connection right there. So I'm going to try and give a review, going to give my take on it. I certainly lean more in one of these two directions, but I hopefully can be that person that can see the positives and the negatives and have a reasonable conversation. Maybe I can be a little part of helping some of you to have a more reasonable version of the conversation. You can have your passion, just don't turn your brain off in the process. Be able to hear other people, listen to what they're saying, and respond to what they're actually saying, not your interpretation of it. Like, actually hear each other in the comment section. Actually hear what I'm saying. Don't take sentences out of context, but listen to my arguments and engage with the full line of thinking. And maybe we can start to have more pleasant conversations about The Last Jedi. With that said, let's get started talking about the good. And the first thing on the positive side is that it is a very thematically rich film. It has ideas that it wants to explore. It has these themes, these emotions that it explores through the journey that each of our characters go on throughout the film. So, of course, the obvious one is Luke, this idea of fallen heroes that's so divisive, but it actually is an idea that's being explored that's new, different, and interesting inside of this franchise. But even like with the Finn character, they're doing things with him on his journey on the weird casino rabbit trail they go on. With Poe, obvious sorts of ideas about what actually it means to be a hero and what's wise inside of that and what they do with him. There's a lot of big ideas inside of it. Likewise, Luke's critique of the Jedi is information that is kind of overlooked inside. It's almost like a plot hole created by the prequels. Not that the prequels did anything wrong, but the inherent nature of all of this to tell the story about how the Jedi, they were so awesome, but they fell. The original doesn't really address the fact, like, how were they so good at what they were doing, and then the whole thing kind of collapsed in on them. How did that really happen? And so Luke's critique, that's a good thing that needs to be inside of Star Wars, that it kind of acknowledges, like, wait a minute, Jedi are awesome, but there's some problems inside of what they're doing. That's a legitimate criticism, that this big council of Jedi with this whole force that's kind of keeping the peace, and then just this one guy kind of comes along and they didn't sense what was going on. They made some really bad choices and it collapsed. That's an interesting idea to put inside of a movie, and especially coming from someone we respect like Luke, it's a powerful thing because Luke is a hero Jedi that did save the galaxy. So him realizing this about them, that's kind of profound in the way that it kind of plays out, or some of the things that he says. Those are important ideas. And the movie does a lot of things like that that I think are pretty good. Are these themes the best themes for Star Wars? We will get to that in the negative, but that it has ideas it wants to explore, that it is thematically rich. I really enjoy that about this film. Another thing I think it is probably the best looking Star Wars movie. I don't know necessarily want to say definitively that, but there's so many things inside of this movie that are just gorgeous with the use of colors, the richness of the colors, the contrast, the throne room being an obvious example of this with just these gorgeous crimson reds inside of it and then the whites and the blacks. It's just a gorgeous looking shot. But then, we get to the end sequence inside of it and the use to the white salt with the red shooting out, the red cloud dust, or even when you step on it, turns red. So much great use of colors, so many shots that are fantastic throughout this whole film. Everywhere they go, gorgeous looking shots. And, that's fully to the credit of Rian Johnson and his team that they made a gorgeous looking film here with gorgeous looking sets. And they went to new locations that have a new, different look to them. One of the most frustrating things about The Force Awakens is that they played it so safe. They wanted to do such a nostalgia film that the locations they went to were all just kind of mirrors of things that we'd seen in the original trilogy. For better or for worse, one of the things George Lucas did really well with all of the Star Wars films he was over is that he wanted to take the movies to new locations and new planets. And so, ice planet, and then we go to a swamp, and then you have Tatooine, and then we go to a forest, and there's a lot of contrast in the appearance of the locations and looking for new ones. So then when you have the technology, suddenly we're going to ocean planets and things like that when you get to the prequels, but different locations. And then you get to The Force Awakens and it's like, these are copies of what we saw in the original trilogy. And it was all intentional. They were making a nostalgia film. They were trying to play into what we loved before. But they didn't go to new places. And this one does, whether we're talking about Luke's little nice island. We haven't seen anything like that before, well, besides the last scene in The Force Awakens. So maybe JJ does get credit for our little island there. But, then whether go into casinos, going to this planet where if you step on the salt, it turns red. There's different new locations inside of it and what we're seeing. And I think that that's a positive inside of these. Some of the sequences themselves are pretty fantastic. The throne room one is the one that people talk about the most, of this battle with Kylo and Rey against Snoke's guards, and just the way it plays out in Snoke's arrogance and missing what's going on with Kylo, to the staging of the whole thing. Once again, it's a gorgeous film. So the the location of the fight combined with the choreography and these just such vibrant colors makes for a great little sequence. And inside of it, I mean, just even like the chain things that they're spinning, they're just beautiful in the way that they move, the way they glisten when they collide with lightsabers and things like that. And then you have choreography that's kind of interesting, these two people partnering up that you think you're kind of seeing this redemption inside of it, and a fantastic little sequence. And then you got Mark Hamill. I think it's pretty safe to say that this is easily Mark Hamill's best performance as Luke Skywalker. You might not like the writing of the character, but his performance here is just easily some of the best that he's ever done. Because you think like the original Star Wars, he's so whiny, he's so impatient in Empire, and then he's so just stoic and one-dimensional and serious in Return of the Jedi. So you see him here, and you see kind of the completion of all of that. You see an older person, you have some of that impatience and some of that tone that you had in A New Hope and Empire, except from kind of a cranky old man that doesn't know why he's being bothered. That leads to some pretty funny lines where everybody's from somewhere. She's like, I'm from Jakku. He goes, I guess that is nowhere. Like, it's a pretty good line. Or when he's trying to teach Rey and she's not, reach out with the Force. And so she reaches out with her hand and slaps it. There's several little moments that are nice little jokes that they feel like an older Luke kind of doing the Yoda thing with her in ways that feel like what he would do. Beyond that, you're seeing a broken Luke, in which case there's a lot of opportunities for him to emote and have a bunch of different deeper things than we even saw in some of the older films with the kind of the way that he was written, which just sets up Mark Hamill to give a great performance, have a lot of great moments inside of this film. Once again, maybe you don't like the writing, but that's none of the issues I think that you can make with this movie point at Mark Hamill. Like, a lot of people are mad about Luke in this movie, but it's not Mark Hamill that is at all to blame for any of that. So in general, it's a movie that has, like, the color, the look of it is gorgeous. So the individual way the action is shot is quite well done at times. The attempts at deeper themes, I think, can be quite rewarding inside of it, but I also think that there are quite a few problems with this film. So let's move on to the mixed aspect of the film. The only thing I wanted to touch on here was Luke's final showdown in the film, where he shows up, walks out to stare down Kylo Ren, and, the blasters shoot at him and he keeps going. And essentially he lives out the hero fantasy of Luke Skywalker staring down the First Order with him and his laser sword, the one that he made fun of earlier in the film, only to discover that it was a trick, and now he's learned not to just use his might, but to use his mind to overcome evil. In a bunch of different ways, I think that that's a really smart and clever thing to do. I like the idea of the sequence is actually really smart. And I don't even think the execution of the sequence is all that particularly bad. It's a nice little sequence, but the way it ties into the use of the character in the whole of the film, and we'll get into this in the negative just a little bit, it's one that just leaves me feeling frustrated that we just never really got to see Luke in full Luke Jedi meditation for 35 years mode. Because we saw him as the guy that was becoming the Jedi and like just starting to be the Jedi Knight in the original trilogy, and now this is him with all the time studying it, all the time to get good at it. And what do we see? He's kind of fights Rey around with a little stick a little bit, and then he does his little trick with Kylo, and we never get full Luke mode. Like, one of the things that people just loved about Rogue One is that final sequence with Darth Vader, where with 21st century technology, you get Vader just tearing guys to pieces. And it's only a minute long, but you get to see Vader throw down, get that fan service, that payoff, 1 minute of it. And that just made people so happy. So you went into The Last Jedi really hoping that we were going to get some Luke throwdown. And the movie itself has all these things it wants to say about, hey, maybe that's not what you should want. Maybe that's not what Jedi should be doing. Maybe Jedi should be growing, learning, changing, things like that. Okay, I kind of get what you're saying. I get that. But come on. Of course I wanted to see Luke do that. Why would I not want to see Luke do that? Like that's you're going to bring Luke Skywalker back and be like, yeah, but we don't want him to actually use a lightsaber. Understandably, that leaves me in a position where I get out of the movie and I'm like, why didn't I get that? What you delivered was an interesting idea sequence that I wouldn't have a problem with if you also delivered the thing that obviously everybody wanted. You subverted my expectations. That we'll talk about in just a second. I just think I would have preferred to have 1 minute of Luke just tearing guys to pieces and using the Force or whatever to defeat them than I would to have him be like, oh, look, he's smart now too and can do this new trick where he appears somewhere that he's not and then dies from him. With that said, let's move on to the bad. So when it comes to this movie, it's kind of infamous for the phrase subverting your expectations. It's a movie that very often has things where you think it's setting one thing up. There's what you expect a Star Wars movie to do. There's the things that were kind of teased in The Force Awakens. And then when it comes time for the payoff for that, for us to see what's going to happen, it subverts your expectations. It just does something wild, crazy, and different. So right out of the gate, Rey shows up, walks up. It's our last scene in The Force Awakens. She reaches out with the lightsaber. Luke grabs it, just throws it over his shoulder, which unexpected. That was, of all the things I would have brainstormed if I was writing this movie and just written down, I could have written 10,000 ideas down. And I don't think the one that I would come up with was he just tosses it over his shoulder. That I don't think that would have made my list of 10,000. It subverted my expectations. Very unexpected. Is that a good thing, though? Like, is just doing something different for the sake of being different a good thing? And I don't think so. And, like, as we get into Luke and the reason behind it, I think you can get to a point in time where, like, debating was the direction they took him a good idea. But I think when you have things that are just so right out of the gate, stepping on people's toes, like Luke grabs his father's lightsaber and just tosses it behind him as if it's just nothing to him. That's not just doing something deep and interesting with the character. That just feels like shock jock storytelling. It's just something what? They just want to make it so clear from the beginning that that's who he is, that it's not even like he says something that's like profound. Oh, what? Where is Luke that he thinks? It's not even that he said something. He just says something so flippant and disrespectful that it just doesn't feel real. It feels like an SNL parody or something of what Luke Skywalker would do. It's whoop. Like you're just, what's a joke thing he could do? He just toss it behind his shoulder. That's what that moment felt like to me. Or the two things that were kind of teased in The Force Awakens that don't really pay off in this movie. Who is Snoke and then who are Rey's parents? I mean, there's a lot of debate on the internet as to how much The Force Awakens actually sets up Snoke as this big villain that has to be taken down, and how much is that just the audience built anticipation in their own theories and they were disappointed? Or likewise with Rey's parents, how much is that people thought she needed to be someone special and had to be an Obi-Wan, a Skywalker, Luke's daughter, the missing child of Solo or something like that? How much were we thinking that and we built that up in our own minds rather than what was actually there? And I just don't, I think there's some truth to that the internet can build up these theories that go too far. The flip side to that is that, like, J.J. Abrams has given a TED Talk on his mystery box. Like, it's a TED Talk he gave like 15 years ago, and it's all about his storytelling. One of the things that he does to build intrigue is this whole concept of a mystery box is you have something out there that people are curious about that makes them, oh, I wonder about that. I wonder what the answer to that is. And that's part of what he does in his storytelling is put these ideas out there down the line that just hooks the audience in because they're just waiting for an answer to it. So if out of nowhere you have this person that's suddenly in power and he's the supreme leader of the First Order, you might not necessarily have this big, bold plotline for him, but naturally, humans are going to be like, where did this guy come from? Because I know where Kylo Ren came from, and I can kind of understand the idea of what a First Order, like, well, actually, I don't exactly know what the First Order is, but I can understand that there's an evil force out there, a group of people that have totalitarian intentions. But where did the guy that's leading it come from? Who is he? And then there's little lines of dialogue about him and him seducing Kylo and things like that makes you go, who is that guy? That, of course, we have those questions that Is he the main focus? Is he the main villain? He doesn't have to be. But to pretend as if like we're being weird that we're wondering that's not real. So it subverts our expectations. Nah, he doesn't matter. He's gone. Just kind of gone. Like you were teasing us doing the Return of the Jedi throne room type scene inside the movie, and then ta-da, it's not that. Like, you subverted my expectations. You surprised me. But you also cheated a little bit, because you certainly teased some things and you subverted my expectations by setting up a false expectation or setting up a false mystery. Or likewise with Rey's parents, she keeps talking about she needs to get back to Jakku. She keeps talking about being left behind, and then she has these visions. Of course, she has the Force. We're wondering, like, is there some reason for that? And so then naturally, we're curious about that. There were things that Rey said that made us wonder, why does she keep wanting to go back to Jakku? Why is she sitting there waiting and looking up to the sky? Like, what is that? They show images of her childhood being dropped off and then flying off. What was that? Now, I don't actually mind the answer being that her parents are nobody. I think that is kind of important inside of the world of Star Wars, that the Jedi don't just come from magic lineages, like special lineages. There's people besides Skywalkers, and that's how people got the Force for all generations. That's important for us to remember that. But the way it's presented is kind of like just this, like, it's going nowhere. It kind of squashed the intrigue surrounding it, which even, I think there was a certain amount of intrigue going into The Last Jedi, and all the things we were intrigued about kind of got squashed a little bit in this movie. And so I don't even know what to expect in Rise of Skywalker, because all the intrigue was like, no, we subverted your expectations to the degree that there's no more intrigue. JJ's mystery box, the lid was taken off, it was empty, and we weren't given a new mystery box. So I think that's even why some people, it leaves them in a weird place going into this next film. So that's where this idea of subverting expectations, I get that there's value in wanting to do something different, but when it just feels like different for the sake of different, of course, naturally, you're going to leave some people feeling burned by what you're trying to do. I mean, when I stub my toe, reality has subverted my expectation of security. It's not a good thing, though. And inside the whole movie, there's some things that are just kind of odd with I talked about the deep, rich themes that I appreciate that it was trying to communicate those things. But like one of them is almost an anti-heroism sort of idea. Star Wars movies have always been kind of this traditional good versus evil heroes doing their own thing, kind of going for it. Luke flying and turning it off his targeting deal, trusting the Force, going with your gut, going rogue. That's always kind of been Star Wars, and it's been celebrated. And then you get to this movie, and the movie seems more interested in critiquing heroism and being a hero and going out there and sacrificing things than it does in providing the experience that we've always come to expect from Star Wars. The types of decisions that have always been celebrated in our lead characters are now being critiqued inside of it. So you go through it. Luke, of course, is critical of the Jedi and his own fame, his own legendary status. He's very critical of it. And his character has a story that very much there's a reason where some of that's coming from in critiquing the Jedi. But then you get to Poe's story, and he's doing all of these very Star Wars Star Wars cocky pilot type things to do inside the movie. And every single time he just blows it, screws up, is punished, is reprimanded, and makes things worse to the degree that hundreds, thousands of people die because he just went rogue. He did what Star Wars characters normally do, and that's suddenly a bad thing. In the finale of the movie, Finn is trying to go and sacrifice himself to try and take out this laser so everybody else can escape. And then Rose crashes into him to stop him from doing that and lecture him on, the way we're going to win this war isn't by destroying what we hate, but by saving what we love, which I don't even think makes any sense since he's sacrificing himself for all the people that he cares about back there. And it just keeps on saying, no, these tropes of heroes sacrificing and doing what their gut feeling. No, that's all bad. That's bad stuff. Don't do that. And I almost feel like that's as much as the treatment of Luke, which we'll get to in just a minute, I think that's just as much of why so many people felt like their toes were getting stepped on with this movie. that you go into a Star Wars film expecting Star Wars type, good old fashioned swashbuckling heroes showing up to save the day with their laser sword. And then you have instead Luke Skywalker being like, what, you want me to show up and stare down the First Order with my laser sword? And then when the movie even delivers that sequence where he shows up with his laser sword to stare down the First Order, it's like, no, of course that's not what actually happened. That's not what heroes actually should be doing. And it keeps punishing the audience for getting excited about our heroes trying to do things, whether that's, you know, obviously Luke chastising the audience about their treatment of him and giving him too much legendary of a status. Of course, the Poe plotline entirely. We're on board with him. We're like celebrating what he's doing until suddenly someone tells him, no, actually, here's what we're doing. He's like, oh, that's a good idea. And so we realize that we've been rooting him on in setting up a scenario that leads to all these ships being destroyed and all these people dying. Tricks the audience. Once again, we're like, oh no, oh wow, this is bold that Finn's going to sacrifice himself. Nope. Expectations subverted. Someone crashes into him in the middle of a battle to save him by crashing into him and knocking herself out. Like, what? And I think that just steps on a lot of people's toes that happened. And I think that's even the language of the conversation surrounding the movie. Some of the articles that I've read about the film defending it. This movie saved Star Wars. I read them and it feels like someone's kind of like talking down to being condescending that I wanted Star Wars type things in a Star Wars movie, that I wanted the experience you've like trained me to expect from a Star Wars movie. I want you to deliver that to me and not criticize me for wanting that. Like, I don't think that's terribly unreasonable. And that's what the movie feels like. Both the movie itself is kind of criticizing, obviously, the characters inside of it, but to an extent, for that same reason, the audience for wanting what you've traditionally gotten from a Star Wars movie. And then likewise, on the flip side, the people defending the film have kind of done a lot of that too. Now, people that hate the film have been equally abusive, ridiculous, over the top too. There's a lot of ridiculous behavior surrounding this film. But for me, someone that tries to be in the middle, like I have a side, but I'm in the middle in a lot of ways. Like I just read a lot of articles and it's like, why are you talking down to me for wanting Star Wars to be Star Wars? Next thing I want to talk about is the treatment of Luke. A thing that, of course, this is Mark Hamill made some statements indicating he wasn't crazy about the direction. Of course, a bunch of the fan base wildly not a fan of what they did with it. And then other people are like, it's a brilliant study of fallen heroes and how we put people on pedestals and that's not always healthy. It's just like such wildly different takes on, we're all seeing the exact same thing. And I think one thing you have to keep in mind is that JJ wrote Rian Johnson into a specific corner with the movie, with what is in The Force Awakens about Luke Skywalker failing, heading off to an island. Some of the stuff about Luke giving up hope, that's not really just what Rian Johnson wrote. That's the place that he was left. That's the path. The baton was passed to him with JJ saying that Luke disappeared and ran off to an island. And Rian had to figure out what to do with that. And so some of the stuff that I think that he does with that, I think is good. Stuff I mentioned before, the critiques of the Jedi and things like that I think there's some interesting ideas. The specific execution of how we learn about what happened with him and Kylo, I just don't think is good storytelling. To get us from Luke as the most optimistic hero in the universe that wouldn't give up on his dad, that saved the universe by being so optimistic that he could save the day, to, I better kill my student. That's a really big leap. It's a big leap between those two things. We left us at he saved the universe, and we pick up with him tossing the lightsaber behind him because he saw the Force, the dark side rising up in a student, so he tried to kill him. It's just such a big gap there that I don't know how you do that plot line without that being the entire focus. And he's not the star of this movie. It's not his trilogy, so he's a side character, but they put such a deep plot line, like so much backstory there, that I don't feel like they had enough time to get me as an audience member to buy into that. Because like you spent 3 movies showing me how optimistic this guy is and how, he's just a farm boy 2 days ago and now he's in an X-Wing blowing up the Death Star. He's that guy. And now he sees Kylo sleeping and he's like, I better take this guy out before he gets too powerful. It's like the journey between these two things of what I saw so much of him and where he is now. you have to do more to build that bridge between them for me. Some people, they were able to buy into it. I wasn't. I needed more like to get me there. And what we get in the movie is flashbacks. And it does like this, I don't know, like almost like, to me, felt kind of corny flashback where we see it from three perspectives. Luke's deception, where he's like, Kylo turned on me, and you see him walk in there, and then Kylo's the one that initiates the first action. Then we see it from Kylo's perspective, which is Luke comes in crazy, he was trying to kill me, and that's who he is. And then we see the third one, that's Luke's admission, which is I went in there to kill him, and in that moment I saw the fear, and I changed my mind. It was that moment of weakness, and then I changed my mind. I like telling it that way, just like so forced, so on the nose. It doesn't feel like great storytelling to me. And like I said, with that much backstory from this guy of hope to this position here, I don't think you can do it with these three little quick flashbacks of all the same thing from three different perspectives. Like, I just don't think you just can't get me there. You need to do more because of how much history we do have with Luke. So it just didn't work for me. And that was so foundational for me to be able to buy into where Luke is at, that it made it tough for me to kind of swallow the Luke pill that is this gigantic Luke pill that he is cynical, given up. Just he came to an island to die, and he doesn't think the Jedi should exist anymore. I can't get there, and they didn't do enough work to get me there. And as much as there's ideas and I can appreciate what they're trying to do, they needed a lot more time. They needed him to be the star of the movie for that to work. And of course, he can't be the star of the movie. He shouldn't be the star of the movie. So I just don't know that this is a plot line that you can do. That Luke tried to kill Kylo the way that he did. You can't get me there. Totally different direction. Back to our Resistance on the run. The Poe plot line in the film, in his kind of conflict with Holdo, I just don't think it makes any sense, and it never has to me. They're trying to set up he's just this cocky guy that just doesn't listen to anyone and just thinks he can shoot from the hip and he'll always be successful. So he needs to learn not to do that. Okay, I think there's some value in that. The way the movie plays out, it kind of leaves a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth that you're like, Star Wars heroes shouldn't be Star Wars heroes. But the way they do this is they have Princess Leia getting taken out. She does the Mary Poppins to get back in. It's nice that they let her use the Force, the actual thing that she specifically does. Come on. You couldn't come up with something better than Force pulling herself back. Like, not crazy about the whatever that was. But so then Holdo takes over. Poe shows up. Hey, what's our plan? Not an unreasonable question. Not crazy that this would happen. And her take is that this guy just got demoted. He's an idiot. Like, who is this guy right here? And so she's just belligerent to him and won't answer any of his questions. Doesn't even say something like, Poe, I understand that, like, you want to do something. We have a plan. We are working on something. Just, you need to trust me. You need to trust. I have it under control. I can't share it because too much stuff's like that. Like, there's too much is at stake, but we have doesn't do that. Like that, like the simple thing that would, like, someone saying, I assure you, we have a plan. We're thinking through this, could go a long way. And she doesn't do that. She's just belligerent with him. She talks down to him, which in a screenwriting sense sets her up as like, is she like working for them? Is she a bad guy? Like, what's going on here? Like, we're designed to like not like her because she's standing up to our hero. And then they have, three of these interactions where each time we keep being given information that is supposed to trick, like, we're in his perspective, like we're siding with him naturally because he's our hero, he's our protagonist. So we see her as an antagonist, and we're given just enough information that like makes us angry about what she's doing and siding against her. And then we have the big reveal, like, oh, she did have a plan all along. In which case, like, I just get to that point in time and I go, but why didn't you just say that? Why didn't you do anything that would make me as an audience member or him as the guy that like does his own thing? Why didn't you say anything that would try and rein him back in or help me understand where you're coming from? Because it just seems like you're being belligerent. And like, so the argument I've heard from people is like, Poe was just demoted. He's been going reckless. So why would she give him information? Like, he's also a hero of the Resistance. Like, the reason that he's able to walk up to her Like, you have to keep this in mind. He's walking up to her. He's like on the bridge and has full access to the person that's in charge of everything because he's Poe. Like, if you've ever been in any sort of organization that with large numbers of people, not everybody just gets to walk onto the bridge, gets to walk into the main conference room. Not everybody gets to walk up to the CEO and just start talking to them. So if someone is able to do that and is doing that, they probably have some sway. You know that they have sway. You know that there's a reason that they have the influence amongst people to do that. You don't just write them off. So that plotline just, it never made, like, it's designed to subvert once again an expectation that you think Holdo's an idiot. And then it turns out that she had this really good plan and then she sacrifices herself. So we realize the person over, like, not the person we think's going to be the hero, but this person over here, she's the true hero. Expectation subverted in a way that leaves once again a sour taste in my mouth. Because, like, why did I have to feel dumb for like all this to play out? Like, I trusted you in the information that you gave me, but you tricked me the same way that you kind of tricked Poe by not telling him what was going on. And then once again, the next sour part to it is like, then just people start dying left and right because of what Poe did. So who's the idiot here? The person, like, are we supposed to think that Poe is an idiot because of what he did? Kind of. That's one of the messages is that, like, don't do this shoot from the hip thing. Or is it her for not just giving basic information or like, can you trust me? Like, please trust me. Leia trusted me. I need you to trust. Did you trust her? She trusted me. Like that sort of thing. Doesn't do that. Is she the idiot for not doing that? Or like he pulls a gun on her and she doesn't go, wait, Pope, come over here. Like, I mean, whisper in your ear what we're doing. Like, I don't know what you're doing, but please don't do anything too crazy. We're going to sneak out the back. Like, why didn't she do that? And because of it, all these people died. Because what he did, what she did, both of them act stupid. But we're kind of supposed to think she's the sacrificial hero inside of it. It's just such a frustrating plot line to do inside of them. Like, I don't know. That one in particular, of just like the writing of it, like, I don't think it's good writing. Of course, easy to pick on the casino plotline inside of that one. They don't know what to do with Finn in this movie, so they give us Rose, Tico, put them off this adventure. They go to this casino that's the worst designed planet in all of Star Wars because it just seems like Las Vegas. And it's, I don't know, supposed to be some commentary on something, and then there's animal cruelty and slavery, and then they free an animal, and they're like, now it's worth, all of this was worth it. Like, just really weird stuff. There's just ill-conceived messaging of like, there's like literally kids still in slavery back there, and one animal got freed, or two animals got freed, and you're like, cool with it? Like, that's weird. The chase sequence in it is forgettable and terrible. Like, just doesn't feel like it belongs in a Star Wars movie. Like, people on animals running through a casino, just wrong franchise for that. The whole thing, I think, all of it is bad. The design, the writing, the concepts inside of it, I don't think work at all in the film. And, you know, many people have picked on, like, not been crazy about the use of Finn in the movie, and apparently he's come out himself, the actor, and pretty openly criticized the movie over the last 2 weeks, which I don't recommend doing that, but I guess it validates some of us that had our issues with it, but really not cool to throw the previous director under the bus for that sort of thing. All right, final kind of few things, quick thoughts on this one. It's not, some people like claim it's so bold and it's original, it's a new direction. That's why people are mad because they did something different. At the same time, I mean, it does a lot of the Empire Strikes Back plot beats. Starts off with the Empire or the First Order striking back, discovering a base, so they're on the run throughout the whole movie. That's the plot of Empire. Our new Jedi trainee meets a reclusive former Jedi that used to be the hero. Now they're hiding in shame. They don't want to train the person. They finally agree to train the person. Once again, this is Empire. The throne room with the guy on the seat that's the all-powerful person trying to sway the two. This is Return of the Jedi. There's a lot of things that are straight out of other Star Wars movies here. And once again, when people, it's a masterpiece. It's so bold and original. But some of it's not. Some of it, we're doing the Force Awakens thing where we're just following the templates of the movies that came before. I think Hux is a terrible character. I just don't think he's remotely interesting. I don't think he's well acted. He's been better in every other thing that he's done. Every other movie that he's in, he's much better in that. Here he's just like this screaming guy that's in charge that not interesting, not compelling. There's nothing about him that I particularly like. And then finally, Ghost Yoda, looks horrible. I don't know what's going on with the Ghost Yoda deal, but so I don't know if it's the combination of the direction that they went with the design with the Force Ghost aura around him, that he just looks so cartoonish. And it just, like, whenever he first shows up, it's all like, whoa, like, why am I looking at a cartoon sitting on that rock? It just does not remotely look like a real thing inside of a real space. It looks like a cartoon drawn onto a set. And I don't think the writing doesn't feel quite right. I don't know what he actually says inside of it, the colloquialism page turner in reference to these Jedi journals and stuff, like, oh, the real page turner. Like, Yoda is using our, like, slang for things. Like, it doesn't feel quite right. So I should be really excited that Yoda showed up in it. That should be a fun little sequence. And I just don't think it's very good at all from the look of it. Even the writing just at times is just very funky. Put that all together and you have a Star Wars movie that, like I said, has some great action sequences. I do appreciate that it tried to have some ideas and explore them in deep things. Gorgeous looking film. Maybe the best performance we've ever gotten from Mark Hamill. And then a bunch of ideas and attempts to subvert our expectations that I just do not think worked. I think that they hurt the movie and they took things in a bad direction, unfortunately. So real quick, before I give you my final score on this one, join me down below in the comment section. Share your take on Star Wars The Last Jedi. Please, please be respectful. We're gonna disagree. We can be passionate, but we don't have to be jerks to each other. We can watch a movie, have very different opinions, share those different opinions in a way that's not being mean, nasty, condescending, assuming motives. Just talk about the movie and the ideas inside of it. Also, my review of Star Wars Rise of Skywalker will be Wednesday, and then I'm going to rank all the Star Wars movies on Saturday. Tons of Star Wars content is coming over this next week. I got a spoiler review as well on Friday, so be sure to tune back in for all of that stuff. For me, this film is a lot like Revenge of the Sith in that it's a frustrating film for me. There's a bunch of things that are great and a bunch of things that are not so great. There's a bunch of ideas that I think could have been very cool, but they were executed not very well. When I put all that together, I obviously don't think it's the best Star Wars movie, and I don't think it's the best by quite a bit. Both in what they were going for with some of it, as well as I think that there's story problems. That Poe plotline, I think, has a lot of holes inside of it, and it's such a big part of the story that's a problem for me. But it's also far from the worst. There's a lot of really good things inside of this one that redeem aspects of it. But for me, it is one of the most disappointing Star Wars movies we've ever gotten. It's a C+ overall. It's a 6.5 on the entertainment scale. And this is a pretty disappointing film for me that's only for Star Wars fans. Or maybe you should check it out just to see where you fall on it. I don't know. If you're watching this, obviously you've already seen it. You're a Star Wars fan. Be sure to tell me what you thought down below in the comment section. Come back over the next week to check out the rest of my Star Wars content. If you want more stuff right now, there's a playlist right over there with the rest of the reviews in this series. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.